This performance, portal performance is of utmost importance these days. As you all know, if it's a low performing portal, it's equivalent to losing your business. So it's not that whenever you go live you need to take care of your portal performance, but it's right from the beginning stages of designing your application, you need to take care of your Liferay portal performance. So in this specific webinar, we'll be going through some of the best practices. So the agenda for this webinar is why performance matters, best practices to get maximum from Liferay. So we'll be going into brief introduction of some of the best practices related to architecture, load balancing and clustering, configuration, caching, development, load testing, and performance tuning. At the end of this, we'll just brief you about who we are, about CIGNEX Datamatics, and then we'll leave the floor open for this Q&A sessions. As we all know, why performance matters? Because portals cannot be slower. So they have to be slick, but they cannot be slower. So this optimal performance can be attained by following some of the best practices, which will be going through in this webinar in the next coming slides. If you ignore your performance tuning or performance related best practices, you will end up testing the patience of your customer, and the result would be the customer would not be looking at your coming to your portal again. So it's like if you have 10 seconds delay on each of your portal pages, you will be having 1 lakh disappointed users per day. And if you have 10 pages per day, that becomes your business decreased productivity, increases your maintenance cost. So overall, the performance matters a lot for the modern day portals, and they have to be as per the industry standards, or it's equivalent to losing your business. So the best practices to follow. One of them is first that we'll be looking into is architecture. Second is the load balancing and the clustering, configuration, the caching mechanism, development, and last is load testing and performance tuning. So once you have all these best practices followed for your Liferay portal, it will be at most guaranteed that your portal will be performing good, at least on the will be performing as per the industry standards. So we'll be starting with the architecture based practice. So this is a Liferay reference architecture, which we usually follow in most of the projects at CIGNEX Datamatics. We do have a networking tier. Follows the network tier is the web tier, and beside of at the bottom it's the application tier. And the application tier is responsible for connecting to all your third-party or your database, your Active Directories, your media repositories, your search repositories. So this network tier consists of your firewall and your hardware load balancers. This network tier basically forward your request to the web tier, which in turn are your Apache web servers. And this Apache web servers forwards the request to the corresponding application tier, where you might have multiple application servers available. These application servers will be connecting to the database server, to the Active Directory server, to your media repositories, to your search repositories, fetch the required data from each of your repositories and send it back to the application tier, which in return will be shown back to the users who had made the request. So this is the reference architecture suggested by Liferay. There are some architectural decisions and options that are available for some of the items. Say, first one is the media library storage option. We have a shared file system storage using SAN. So this is one of the most preferred option, that you should have your shared file system storage. The other options that can be used in case you don't have a shared file storage is the database store. You can have a JCR based repository. You can have CMI based repository, and even Liferay supports integration with Amazon S3. So these all integrations are available out of the box with Liferay. You just need to have some configurations in place and you can start using these storage options. Another is the database architecture options. You can have a separate database for read and write. It also supports database sharding. So you just need to provide the sharding related properties in Liferay, and Liferay will be able to use it in that way. There are options available for delivering the static content. By default, all these static contents are served from your Liferay portal application server, but the preferred options are to be served from Apache web server or using your CDN, that is your content delivery network, in case CDN is available. For search repository options, Liferay by default have Lucene inbuilt with clustering enabled, so your indexes and all that can get replicated to all your clusters. Also, it provides integration with Apache Solar. So if you have your Solar server available in your organization, in your IT infrastructure, you can surely integrate Liferay with Solar. Another option is related to caching. So by default, Liferay uses application object caching. It uses EHCache, and it also supports EHCache replication to all your cluster servers. It also supports Terracotta as a cache server, but that's told it's not the default caching mechanism. You can configure the Terracotta cache server. You can also use web acceleration. So using Varnish, Varnish is one of the web accelerators. You can use that in front of your Liferay application server for caching of the static resources. So Varnish is for static resources, and the EHCache and Terracotta can be used for caching your objects on application server. Another important point in architecture is how to size base your Liferay architecture. So these assumptions are below are as per the Liferay 6.1 Enterprise Edition version. Say for example, you have concurrent users trying to sign into Liferay portal at the same time. What it supports is Liferay supports 27,000 users per application server. It supports 6,300 users per application server for say landing on the home page with a 2 seconds of the delay. $5,800 concurrent users accessing your message board portlet including login, 6,000 users for block portlet, and 5,400 concurrent users for media library including login. So this is the range that one application server can support. Now according to your requirement of the concurrency users, you can decide how many application servers are required for your Liferay portal. We do suggest some of the default hardware configurations for your architecture. So hardware configuration for web server, which is your Apache web server. These are the configurations. We suggest one Intel Core 2 Duo server with 4 GB of memory. Application server, your Liferay portal server, which will be, we will suggest 2 Intel Core 2 Quad servers for clustering with 16 GB of memory. And your database server can be 2 database servers, Intel Core 2 Quad with 16 GB of memory. So basically application servers and the database server in 2 seconds. So this results that you need to have your 2 application servers for this particular 12,000 concurrent login request scenario. You can calculate your web servers on the basis of your application server. Web servers ideally do not have that much processing to do. They are just like gatekeepers which forward the request to the application servers and get the response from application servers and serves it back to the users. So the load on the web server will be around 40% of your application server. So the number of web servers that are required are application servers divided by 2. So in this case, if you have 2 application servers, you require 1 web server. And it is always recommended to use multiple database instances with replication for production environment. This is in case one of your databases get down, your production environment is not affected, as you have replicated the entire data from one database to another database. And that's the main reason why we also suggest having 2 application servers as database servers, because in case one of your application server is down, the another application is still up and start serving the request. Your performance of the portal might go down, but your portal will be still up and running. The next best practice that we'll be looking into is load balancing and clustering. So this is load balancing and clustering is required when you have multiple application servers and web servers in place in your architecture. On Apache web server, we usually suggest Apache web server as a load balancer, and it is recommended to use busyness load distribution method against round robin. So if one of the Apache web server is busy, then only the request will go to another web server. Usually we do have a firewall in place between the web tier and the application tier. So in that particular case, it is recommended to use socket keep alive option. So when you have this option enabled, the number of times the web tier tries to connect to the application tier, the time taken is less, because the socket between this web tier and application tier is alive. You also need to configure the max clients in Apache server in accordance to your application server thread pool. And if you don't require your session replication between your nodes, then session replication you can avoid it. And sticky session should be used in Apache load balancer, so that a particular request once made to a particular app server will always make a request to that app server. In case that app server is down, only in that scenario the request will get navigated to another app server. There are some best practices related to clustering. So as most of the items have been cached, caching has been used in our application. So for cache replication and distribution, it is recommended to use EH-cache replication using cluster-link. This is provided by Liferay for all its EE customers, this cluster-link, so that it automatically does the replication of the EH-cache. Or in option, you can also use Terracotta as a distributed cache. For media library storage, selecting the right option, I think we already discussed this in one of the previous slides. SAN is the most preferred recommended option, file system based storage using SAN. And other option could be DB store repository. And DB store repository is recommended over JCR based database storage. For search index synchronization, and again the cluster link application that's provided to the EE customers will always do the Lucene indexes replication. And if you're using Solar as a search engine, then that's an absolutely a different server, Solar server, that will be handling all these requests. The next best practice that we'll be looking is into the configuration. If you have your architecture in place, if you have servers and hardware as per the best practices, but if you don't configure your Liferay portal as per the best practice standard, then it might result that you still may not get your best performance. So some of the Liferay related configurations, best practices are, there are number of servlet filters. You can disable those, disable unnecessary servlet filters using our portal configuration file of Liferay. By default, Liferay tracks the user sessions, what user is doing. So you can disable that by disabling the session tracker memory enabled so that your application requests are served fast. If you don't want the user to have changed the dynamic look and feel of the application, it's the static, then you can disable the dynamic CSS and look and feel mode in Liferay. There are number of schedulers that Liferay has for its different features. So in case you are not using those features, then you can disable schedulers for it. For example, message board continuously keeps on running a scheduler to check whether there are updates to any message or not. In case your portal is not using the message board function, then you can go ahead and disable those schedulers. There are a number of auto login hooks that Liferay provides by default. You should disable all the unused auto login hooks and just use the ones that you have. Disable unused Liferay features. Say, for example, block portlet provides a feature of ping back and trackback features, but in case you don't want such features, then you can disable through portal exe so that this particular activities do not use up your application. Liferay provides with the counter facilities. Say, if you need how many times this web content is been read or been viewed, how many times your file ranking has been done. So all those counters you can disable unused counters using portal configuration. We do have web content view counter properties and different counter properties available. You can just disable them so that unnecessary processing is not done when a web content is viewed. So the response will be faster compared to if the property is on. One of the major things is for checking of the inline permissions, which is one of the heavy operations in Liferay. So whenever you are using a collaboration feature, it basically always checks for the inline permissions. But if you don't require that permission check, then you can disable those inline permissions configurations so that the permission check is not made and the features will start working fast. So the previous configuration best practices that we looked were related to Liferay application server. There are also some configuration best practices for Apache web server. So it is always recommended to serve your static resources using CDN. If CDN is not used, then we recommended using serving it through web server, Apache web server. Apache web server should be configured to add longer cache headers for static resources so that the static resources are cached for a longer period in your Apache web server and it does not have to make calls frequently to the app server to get the static resources. Apache's web server mode deflect should be used to compress JavaScript CSS files using gzip compression. So if you do gzip your JavaScript and CSS files, they will get smaller in size and the amount of the time that is required to load these resources will be less into your browser. So it will result into the faster loading of your JS and CSS files. The next topic that we'll be looking at is into the development best practices. You have your good architecture, you have configured it. but at the base it's the code that serves your request, executes and serves back with the result. So if there are some major issues in your code, you'll suffer in your performance. So some of the best development best practices. It's recommended to merge them into a single call. So merge them into a single file so that a single call is made and the entire JS and CS is loaded. If you have multiple JS and CSS files, those many network calls will be required to load those files. So this will result into the reduced number of HTTP requests. Images, you require a specific size images on your page. So they should be sized not on the page, but they should be sized and kept it into a repository so that the same image is loaded, because scaling of images is one of the heavy operations which can take a lot of time. You should have limited DOM operations in JS to support IE7 and IE8, because those are a bit older browsers, and if you have a lot of DOM operations, those browsers will get hanged up. All web pages that are developed must be checked against one or many tools: Dynatrace, Ajax Edition, Wiseflow, and PageSpeed. So the projects that are executed in CIGNEX Datamatics, they almost go through all of these tools, get the ratings. We do some changes as suggested by these tools, and then we go ahead and for this production deployment of this code. So once you have all of your best practices in place, it's time to load test your application. So you have your architecture, your configurations, your coding best in place, and now you need to load test your application just to measure whether it's giving you the appropriate performance or not. So there are some preconditions for performing the load testing. So your load testing environment should be the replica of your production environment. This is one of the major requirement, because in case you don't have it as a replica of production environment, then the performance that you might get on this load testing environment will be different from your production environment. Load testing scripts should be realistic. What it means is, if the number of requests that you are trying to make per minute or per second should be realistic and as per your requirement. It should not be that you are making very less requests, or the number of requests made are much higher than you are expecting it. Otherwise, it will not be a realistic performance test. So when this load test has been performed, there should be some proper monitoring system in place that should be configured to measure the resources. So during load test, the resources that should be measured are the Liferay portal JVM, the Liferay portal database connection pool, Liferay portal thread pool, your Apache web server processes, your Apache web server memory usage and CPU usage, database server memory usage and CPU usage, your cache statistics. These are required to know how many miss and how many hits you have in the cache, and the log files. So the log files are your Liferay portal log, web server access log, mode JK log, your database error log, and database slow query log. So all this monitoring should be in place, and on the basis of this monitoring and the result of this monitoring, you might need to tune up some of the parameters related to your Liferay portal, your Apache, or your database. So depending upon your portal JVM monitoring statistics, Liferay portal parameters should be tuned. So if it is the memory that is allocated is less, you can tune up your memory. Even you can come to know about if there is any memory leaks using your JVM monitoring, then you should look into your code depending on that. Depending upon your database connection pool monitoring data, your connection pool settings should be tuned. So if there are less number of database threads and most of the threads are in waiting, then you should, for the access to the database, you should go ahead and configure it appropriately. Similarly, Liferay portal thread pool and web server thread pool should be tuned. So if you see that many number of threads are waiting for the connection of your app server or web server, that means the number of threads that are configured is less. So you should go ahead and tune your thread pools so that more number of requests can be served. Liferay portal cache configuration should be tuned if required. This cache configuration tuning is required so that maximum number of hits are happening to the cache and you are getting the data from the cache. Because if there are a lot of miss happening in the cache, then that will be a load on your application server because it will need to process and get that data. In your database log, you will see some slow queries, if in case there are any. So you should take up those slow queries, tune them up, and put them back again into your application. Because if you have many number of slow queries, then that will result into database locking and other threads will be hanged up. The database configuration parameters should be tuned up, your database memory and all those stuff. Development, the code that you have developed, profiling should be done and the code performance issue should be fixed. So from profiling of your code, you will come to know which particular method of your request is taking a lot of time. You can tune up those, you can look into that development method and you can maybe tune it up so that it responds fast. So profiling will help us in finding the issues related to development, your code. So these are some of the best practices we looked into. We briefed about you on some of the best practices for getting a good portal performance in Liferay. Before we get into Q&A, we'll just brief about CIGNEX Datamatics, who we are. So CIGNEX Datamatics is a subsidiary of Datamatics Global Services Limited. We have been, since 2000, we have been delivering solutions using open source technologies to address the business goals, increase business velocity, lower the cost of doing the business, and get the competitive advantage. When we deliver solutions using open source technologies, it dramatically reduces total cost of ownership and deployment time of IT solutions. We have done 400 plus implementations in open source technologies. We have 450 plus experts for open source technologies, 200 plus integrations, 13 books overall, and 5,000 plus community contributions in Liferay. We do have offices in America, India, UK, Europe, Singapore, and Australia. So we help our clients in different phases and in different types of requirements. We have portals. We develop portals using Liferay, Drupal, JBoss, ZK, HTML5, and MuleSoft. These are some of the different solutions based on these open source portal technologies. We also provide solutions related to enterprise content management. We work on Alfresco, Drupal, Magento, CQ, JBoss, Moodle, AppSoft, and Liferay related projects. And these are some of the solutions that we provide in enterprise content management space. We are into big data analytics, providing using Hadoop ecosystem, MongoDB, Pentaho, Talent, Solar, and Jaspersoft. And these are some of the solutions that we have implemented using big data analytics. The number of services that CIGNEX Datamatics provide. We are into UI development, integration, customization, app development, cloud services. We provide extended development centers for specific developments. Recommended open source adoption model. If it is an internal or non-critical related thing, we have, say, something known as intranet, corporate social networks, document and write management, workflow-based application. If it's an internal application, but it's something related transactional or a bit critical, then we provide BI and cloud related, that is invoice management systems and contract lifecycle management systems. Some external non-critical related open source. So this is our portal practice strength. We have team size of 240 plus Liferay consultants. We have done over 200 plus projects. We have been close working relationship with Liferay since 2001. We are the first global platinum partner of Liferay. We got the Liferay Partner of the Year award in 2011-2010. We even were awarded with Community Excellence Award in 2012 and 2011. We have in total authored 7 Liferay books, conducted Liferay trainings worldwide, and we have over 4,000 posts in Liferay community. Because if you are into an open source space, one of the important factors is you need to give it back to the community. So CIGNEX Datamatics is one of the regular contributors to the Liferay community. We do have one of our authors from CIGNEX Datamatics who has written a book on Liferay portal performance best practices. We provide an performance assessment and tuning services. So CIGNEX Datamatics has this one of the services that it's offering, that is your performance assessment and tuning, where we, if your portal is already into production and you run into some of the performance issues, we assess your application and we suggest the tunings parameters and the best practices so that your portal performance can be increased. So that's one of the services that CIGNEX Datamatics provide. Has been working with CIGNEX Datamatics. I would like you all to join us for our roadshow on SMAC that has been on 8th of July in Frankfurt. The SMAC is Social, Mobile, Analytics and Cloud. That is the 5th wave of IT architecture. So the CIGNEX Datamatics would request all of you to join us for this specific roadshow on SMAC. You can visit, in order to participate for this roadshow on SMAC, please visit this particular site URL germany.signex.com/launch-event. And from here you can just go ahead and register yourself for this roadshow. So we'll look forward to having all of you on this roadshow, and it will be an interesting journey for all of us. Thank you.